Nanya leaned against the large bay window of her elegantly furnished living room, her eyes scanning the quiet Lego street outside. The early morning sun cast a warm glow across the room, illuminating the expensive artwork on the walls and the pristine furniture that symbolized her perfect life. But inside her, the glow of perfection had long faded. Her life, to an outsider, was flawless: a loving husband, a successful career, and a beautiful home in one of Lagos' most affluent neighborhoods. But beneath the surface, she felt an emptiness that gnawed at her soul, an ache that nothing seemed to fill. She sighed, turning away from the window as she heard the front door open and close. Uzoma, her husband, was already dressed for work, his tailored suit hanging perfectly on his broad shoulders. He had always been handsome in a clean-cut, respectable way. His black, neatly combed hair, his deep brown eyes, and his warm smile were enough to make anyone swoon. He was the ideal man, a perfect partner. But to Nanya, he wasn't enough. "Good morning, my love," he greeted her, his smile as affectionate as ever. He moved closer, kissing her gently on the forehead. "I'll be home late today. Big meeting with the investors." Nanya smiled back, masking the turmoil inside her. "Good luck. I know you'll do great." She watched as he walked out of the door, leaving her alone in the house, and the familiar wave of guilt washed over her. Uzoma was a good man, a patient, loving husband who had never given her a reason to doubt his loyalty or devotion. He did everything right, and yet, no matter how hard he tried, no matter how attentive he was, something inside her still yearned for more. It was a hunger that he could never satisfy, no matter how much he loved her. She didn't know when it had begun, this insatiable craving. It wasn't that she didn't love Uzoma, she did. But over the years, their marriage had fallen into a comfortable routine, and while Uzoma seemed content, Nanya felt herself slipping away. There were nights when she lay beside him, staring up at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts of another life. A life filled with passion, danger, and excitement. It was a craving that haunted her every day, and no matter how much she tried to suppress it, it always came back stronger. She picked up her phone from the coffee table and stared at the screen, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened her messages. There it was, Nonso's name, staring back at her like a ghost from her past. "Miss me?" his message read. Nanya's heart raced as she stared at the words, her mind battling with itself. She knew she shouldn't respond. She knew it was wrong. But the craving, the need for something more, was too strong. She could feel it, deep in her bones, pulling her toward him, toward the danger he represented. Wasn't like Uzoma. He wasn't safe. He wasn't predictable. He was wild, exciting, and unpredictable. And that's exactly what drew her to him. She had met him at a business conference 2 months ago, and from the moment their eyes had met, she knew she was in trouble. He had a way of looking at her that made her feel alive, in a way that Uzoma never could. Her fingers hovered over the screen, and before she could stop herself, she typed a response. Maybe. The message sent, and with it, a flood of emotions washed over her. Excitement, guilt, fear. She knew she was playing a dangerous game, but she couldn't stop herself. It was like an addiction, one that she couldn't shake, no matter how hard she tried. She spent the rest of the morning pacing the house, her mind racing with thoughts of Nonso. He had awakened something inside her that she hadn't even realized was there, something primal and dangerous. And now that it had been unleashed, she wasn't sure she could put it back in its cage. The sound of her phone buzzing pulled her out of her thoughts, and she glanced at the screen. It was a message from Nonso. "Let's meet tonight. Same place." Her heart skipped a beat. She knew she should say no. She knew that if Uzoma found out, it would destroy him. But the craving, the need, was too strong. "Okay," she typed back, her hands shaking as she sent the message. She sank onto the couch, her heart pounding in her chest as the reality of what she was doing began to sink in. She was risking everything, her marriage, her life, for a man who was nothing but trouble. But in that moment, she didn't care. All she cared about was the thrill, the excitement, the rush of being with Nonso. The day passed in a blur, with Nanya barely able to focus on anything other than her upcoming meeting with Nonso. She had tried to distract herself by doing household chores, by answering work emails, but nothing could quell the anticipation that burned inside her. As the sun began to set, she found herself getting ready for the night ahead. She chose a dress that she knew would get Nonso's attention, a sleek black number that hugged her curves in all the right places. She styled her hair just the way he liked it, letting it fall in soft waves around her face. As she looked at herself in the mirror, a strange sense of detachment washed over her. The woman staring back at her looked perfect, flawless even. But beneath the surface, she was a mess. She didn't recognize herself anymore. She didn't recognize the person she had become. But that didn't stop her from going. She left the house just as Uzoma had texted to say he was heading into his meeting. Her heart pounded as she drove through the streets of Lagos, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She knew what she was doing was wrong. She knew that she was betraying the man who had given her everything. But as she pulled up to the hotel where she and Nonso had met so many times before, all those thoughts disappeared. All she could think about was the thrill, the excitement, the danger. Nonso was waiting for her in the lobby, his dark eyes locking onto hers as she stepped inside. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a confident swagger that made heads turn wherever he went. His smile was predatory as he approached her, his hand resting on the small of her back as he led her to the elevator. The ride up to the hotel room was tense, the air between them crackling with anticipation. Nanya's heart raced as she stared straight ahead, trying to calm the storm inside her. But the closer they got to the room, the harder it was to control herself. As soon as the door closed behind them, Nonso was on her, his hands rough and demanding as they pulled her close. Nanya surrendered to him, her body responding to his touch in ways that she hadn't felt in years. For a moment, she forgot about everything, about Uzoma, about her marriage, about the consequences of what she was doing. All that mattered was Nonso and the way he made her feel. But the moment was fleeting. As Nanya lay in the bed next to Nonso, her body still tingling from their encounter, the guilt began to creep back in. She stared up at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts of Uzoma. He didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve to be betrayed like this. But at the same time, she couldn't bring herself to stop. She was caught in a web of her own making, and no matter how much she tried to free herself, she kept getting pulled back in. Nonso stirred beside her, his arm draping lazily over her waist. "You're thinking too much," he murmured, his voice low and rough. Nanya forced a smile, turning to look at him. "Maybe I am." He kissed her softly, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her skin. "You worry too much. Just enjoy the moment." But she couldn't. As Nonso drifted off to sleep, Nanya slipped out of the bed, gathering her clothes and dressing quietly. She needed to leave. She needed to get back home before Uzoma realized she was gone. She left the hotel without saying goodbye, her heart heavy with the weight of her choices. The drive home was long and silent, the city lights blurring together as she sped through the streets. By the time she reached her house, Uzoma was already asleep, his even breathing filling the quiet space of their bedroom. Nanya slipped into bed beside him, careful not to wake him. As she lay there, staring up at the ceiling, the guilt and shame began to suffocate her. She had to stop. She had to find a way to break free from this addiction before it destroyed everything. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. This beginning sets the stage for Nanya's growing internal conflict and her dangerous relationship with Nonso. leading to the suspenseful twists and emotional unraveling that will follow. The morning after her encounter with Nanya, Nanya went through her usual routine, but everything felt different. The weight of her actions hung over her like a dark cloud. She went through the motions, making breakfast for Uzoma, and seeing him off to work with her usual warm smile. But inside, she was drowning. After Uzoma left, she found herself staring into the mirror, her reflection a stark reminder of the double life she was leading. She had perfected the art of pretending that everything was fine, that she was the perfect wife in a perfect marriage. But deep down, she knew it was only a matter of time before her mask began to slip. The sound of her phone buzzing interrupted her thoughts. It was Nanya again. "I can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again?" Nanya's heart skipped a beat as she stared at the message. She knew she should end things with him, but the thrill of their encounters was intoxicating. It was like an addiction, one that she couldn't break free from, no matter how hard she tried. But before she could respond, another message came through, this time from Uzoma. "Big news today. I'll tell you everything when I get home. Love you." The stark contrast between the two messages made her stomach turn. On one hand, there was Uzoma, the loving, devoted husband who had done nothing but support her. And on the other, there was Nanya, the wild, unpredictable man who made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. Nanya shoved her phone into her bag, trying to ignore the flood of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. She had to focus. She couldn't let herself get consumed by guilt and desire. But it was easier said than done. The hours passed slowly, and by the time evening rolled around, Nanya was on edge. She had avoided responding to Nanya's message, but the temptation still lingered in the back of her mind. She knew she couldn't keep juggling both men for much longer. When Uzoma finally walked through the door, he looked more excited than she had seen him in a long time. He pulled her into a tight embrace, kissing her deeply before pulling back with a grin. "I got the promotion," he announced, his eyes shining with pride. "We can finally start planning that trip to Paris you've always wanted." Nanya forced a smile, her heart sinking as she realized how far she had drifted from the life she once dreamed of. Uzoma's joy should have made her happy, but instead, it only made her feel more trapped. How could she celebrate with him when she was hiding such a dark secret? "That's amazing, babe," she said, trying to sound as enthusiastic as possible. "I'm so proud of you." Uzoma beamed, pulling her into another hug. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've been my rock through everything." Nanya swallowed the lump in her throat, guilt clawing at her insides. She had been far from the supportive wife he thought she was. But for now, she had to keep up the charade. Days turned into weeks, and Nanya found herself slipping further into a dangerous spiral. Despite her guilt, she couldn't stay away from Nanya. The excitement, the passion, the danger. It was too much to resist. She would meet him in secret, always careful to cover her tracks, but the lies were beginning to pile up. Uzoma, blissfully unaware, continued to plan for their future together. He talked about their dream vacation to Paris, about starting a family, about all the things they had once dreamed of. But for Nanya, those dreams felt like chains, binding her to a life that no longer satisfied her. One night, after another secret rendezvous with Nanya, Nanya found herself sitting in her car, parked outside her house, unable to bring herself to go inside. The weight of her double life was crushing her, and she didn't know how much longer she could keep it up. She stared at her phone, contemplating whether to call Nanya or Uzoma. But before she could make a decision, the phone rang. It was Nanya. "I need to see you," he said, his voice urgent. "I've been thinking. We need to stop sneaking around. I want more." Nanya's heart raced. "More? I'm falling for you, Nanya," he confessed. "This isn't just a fling for me. I want us to be together, for real." No more hiding. Nanya's mind spun. She hadn't expected this. What had started as a dangerous thrill was quickly turning into something far more serious. And now she was faced with a choice: continue living a lie, or risk everything for the man who made her feel alive. "I don't know if I can do that," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Uzoma, he doesn't deserve this." "I don't care about Uzoma," Nanya said, his voice hardening. "I care about you, and I know you feel the same way about me." Nanya was silent, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Did she feel the same way? Or was this just another lie she had been telling herself to justify her actions? "I need time," she finally said, her voice shaking. Nanya sighed. "You can have time, but not too much." "I won't wait forever, Nanya." The line went dead, and Nanya sat in the silence, her heart pounding in her chest. She was standing on the edge of a cliff, and one wrong step would send her tumbling into the abyss. The tension in Nanya's life grew unbearable. Her secret meetings with Nanya became riskier, the lies she told Uzoma more frequent. She was living on borrowed time, and she knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. And it did. One evening, as Nanya returned home from yet another secret rendezvous with Nanya, she found Uzoma waiting for her in the living room. His face was unreadable, but the tension in the air was palpable. "Where have you been?" he asked, his voice calm but cold.